Welcome into another Inside Carolina Portal Scout review, scouting report, offensive line additions. I promised you that last week when Jason Staples and myself got together. So here we are. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Jason, let's get to it. We talked a lot about building from the inside out, defensive line. It feels like they've covered a lot of that. Offensive line, they've gotten 3 recent additions. We're going to stick with those folks. So if you're wondering about any of the guys we don't mention, we've talked about them on a previous show. But let's start it off. Jason, Jordan Hall from UAB. He does not lack for size. North Carolina has some tall linemen and has in the past. 6'8", what's this guy, 330 offensive lineman, just a
Yeah,
monster of a
I think they
man.
listed him at 310, but there's no way that he's only 310.
Yeah, he's
So,
he is TV takes off 30 pounds if he's 310, huh?
yeah, well, I would say he's probably 320 to 325 is my guess on eyeballing it. But you know those guys that are 6'8", they can kind of hide weight. So uh, he is not lacking for size, no question about it. And again, so I've got him at 6'8", 320, 325 is probably about where he plays. And this is a young guy. He's a guy that is really, to me, a developmental prospect that you're bringing in the hopes of him developing into the left tackle that you want to have in your program. I think what they've got on the roster, that's probably the biggest question mark. I mean, that we identified coming out of the spring was, okay, where are they in terms of that left tackle spot? Miles McVay, I don't think has really panned out the way that they had hoped for next year. The talent is still there to potentially be unlocked, but there's a lot. I mean, Miles McVay has miles to go. What you're adding here with Jordan Hall is another guy that is a raw, very toolsy prospect with insane length. The arm length is rare. The the capacity to move and move his feet. He's flashed that. He's kind of a basketball build type. Uh, but again, he's pretty raw at this stage. The hands are a real mess at this point. If you go back and you watch him in pass protection, he's one of those guys. He's just missing his spots with where he's trying to hit his hands, and too often he winds up just kind of chest up and just kind of bear hugging guys, and you know, long haul that's going to get you called for a lot of holding. But again, the foot quickness and the build are there to be able to build on as he is developing in the program. And so he's a guy that he's got 1 year under his belt. He's got at least 3 years of eligibility left. So you're looking at probably 3 years, but if he ends up redshirting or whatever, he's got potentially three years plus a redshirt to be able to play. He is a little, in my view, a little stiff through the hips, and definitely to me needs to continue to build that lower body strength and bend. He plays high, and there's no way around that at this point. He plays upright a little bit and kind of tends to make contact with the upper chest rather than really getting hold of guys and rolling those hips. He doesn't roll the hips all that much as a pass or as a run blocker, and just doesn't dip, quite enough to be able to get that pad level below and lift guys. As he gets stronger, as he gets into a pro grade training program, and he's able to get to sort of unlock those hips a little bit, the potential again is really there, because the foot quickness is pretty good, even though again fundamentally he needs to improve his pass set and all that. He's a little slow out of it and all that. That's pretty normal for a guy of his age and his size and all that. And he does need to learn to sit into his pass set better so that he's not off balance and isn't lunging at guys and isn't playing too high. So there's a lot to work with, but the canvas and the colors that you have to work with here are pretty promising. I don't think he's an immediate starter for you, But again, he's one of those guys that I'm curious to see sort of how he develops with the coaching that he's going to get. And, I think there's a lot of similarities between him coming in now and Sampson coming in last year. I mean, they're very similar players. Uh, I would grade them out pretty similarly, to be honest. I think Sampson was maybe a little bit bigger, uh, not quite as quick a feet, I don't think, as Hall, but maybe just a little bit better bend on the whole. But pretty similar prospects. So if you're looking at the loss of Sampson from last year and then bringing in Hall, you feel pretty good. Although again, Sampson's about a year ahead in the development curve compared to where Hall is at this point. Hall is maybe just a touch behind where I think Sampson was coming into last year, given that Sampson had the advantage of a spring. So that's kind of where I would evaluate him. And I think I think he's a really good addition, especially as you're looking forward towards the future, guy that can turn into what you're hoping to have on the outside at tackle. Maybe not this year, but the year after.
Yeah, there's a great pool there talking about Howard Sampson. Of course, Howard Sampson transferred out of the program. Hall comes in. But we're not done. We're talking with Jason Staples, UNC Portal Scouts, on recent offensive line additions. Next guy, Jakai Moore. If the name sounds familiar, is because he was on that offensive line that North Carolina basically had their way with against South Carolina a couple of years ago. Now, we can debate as to why, but the bottom line is Moore was out there. And, Jason, I want you to tell us about him because he's another one of those guys. He looks good coming off the bus. What's he bring to the table for North Carolina?
Well, first of all, you're getting a guy that again has the frame, and the wingspan jumps off at you right away when you watch him. He's 6'6". They've got him listed at about 310. That again might be a little on the low side compared to what he actually is. I think he's closer to probably 325, 330. And you're looking at a guy that has 1,760 career snaps in the SEC. So he's battle tested. He has been through the fire. He's played against the best defensive lines, although he did play in the SEC East, so not really playing all the best teams in the SEC, but some of them. He's played against some of the best defensive linemen in the country and more or less held up over the 4 years of experience, or 5 years actually of experience that he had. He did redshirt after 3 games of experience in 2019. He's the last of the COVID players, basically, the last part of that last cohort of guys who are still using their COVID year, and has a ton of experience. I mean, you go back to 2019, 101 snaps, 2020, 435, 2021, 249, 2022, 496, 2023, 479. And then he missed all of last year after surgery, so he got that COVID year back. And now he's looking for another place to kind of put the swan song of his career on. And he also wants to get a better degree than what he was able to get as through those others by transferring to Carolina. Whereas previously he was at South Carolina, now he gets to transfer to Carolina and get a better degree. So I think that's got to be a factor as well for him. But in any case, he has that really long arm length. I think overall he's got pretty good strength, and the bulk is excellent. He's more of a leaner when you watch him in 2023, and a lot of folks can easily go back to the North Carolina game in the opener there, where he started at right guard and played virtually every snap. I think he actually did play every snap at right guard in that game. And they gave up 9 sacks in that game, but they weren't on him. You know how many he gave up? 0. So he gave up some pressures, but he was not actually the guy that was victimized over and over again in that game. Tells you a little bit. I think he's a pretty natural pass blocker, but as a run blocker, I think he loses balance a little bit too often. There are times where the angles are not always the best, and he's more of a leaner at this stage. He kind of wants to lean and and kind of get his weight on guys rather than bending. Bending is where you're really getting through those hips and using your power to deliver your power from the ground through those hips. He's a little bit more of a leaner. He wants you to feel the 325 pounds or whatever he is and just kind of work from that, which is where, I think at times he loses his balance too often, both in pass protection and in as a run blocker, especially as a run blocker. But what you're basically getting is somebody who I think is at worst, as long as he's fully recovered from the shoulder surgery that he had that cost him all year last year, and he had it in September. So I mean, you're looking at over a full year of essentially a full year of recovery. So he should be recovered. If he's fully recovered there, you're looking at probably at worst, sort of the low floor here, or the floor here is a replacement level guard with lots of SEC experience. A guy that you can stick in there on the interior and feel like isn't going to get you beat. That's a pretty valuable thing in today's game. And then the other thing that he brings to the table is he also has played a fair amount of tackle. He's played he's played mostly left tackle actually, when he's played tackle, but he's played as he's gotten older, he moved inside, but he has played. I mean, he has multiple starts at left tackle. He had 2 starts at left tackle in 2020, 3 starts at left tackle in 2021, 5 starts at left tackle in 2022. And then he moved inside basically and played a little bit of left tackle in 2023, but he mostly at right guard in 2023. I think he played left tackle in 3 games. But what that gives you then is a guy that, okay, in a pinch, look, we're getting beat out here at left tackle. And we got a guy that's played left tackle and has at least handled that position without making a fool of himself in the SEC. Put him in there, right? Having that kind of swing player that you can play on the inside, that you can kind of plug holes with, I think that's really his value as he comes into North Carolina in his final year, in his 7th year. Nothing's going to take him by surprise. He's going to be a pretty finished product by the time he arrives. And, if you need somebody to take some reps at right guard, at left tackle, if there's a hole that has developed somewhere, you feel like you can plug him in and probably get somewhere around replacement level quality, which, like I said, if you know that you've got a guy that's just not going to get you beat at that position, and you've got a guy that you can play at multiple positions on the offensive line, those guys have some value, and I think that's really what he brings to the table here.
That is Jakai Moore, transfer from South Carolina. Like Jason said, very versatile and can move around, gives North Carolina's coaches some options there. Before we talk about our third guy, let me talk about Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of this show, friends of Inside Carolina, friends of you, the Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Look, we are getting almost into scouting report season where Jason does his player-by-player breakdown of the roster for North Carolina. And let me tell you, I think at last count, there were 58 new names on the roster going into the season.
It's going to be a harder year this year than it has been.
You're going to be searching far and wide for tape and information and looking under cracks and crevices to get all the information you need. Jason needs to do those scouting reports, but you can get them just by being a premium subscriber to Inside Carolina, and you get that 10% off your everyday order if you are that such subscriber. Go to JohnnyT-Shirt.com or Johnny T-Shirt in person. Get all the gear you need and check them out. Jakai Moore got that ad read. I'm going to throw up Johnny T-Shirt. There's the URL at the bottom. But so we got Jakai Moore. We've got Jordan Hall. I was thinking about old number 5 quarterback. Old school folks watching this will remember who I'm talking about. So we got Hall, Moore, and now let's talk a little Will Osteen. You had an opportunity to review some film. I'm going to toss up a couple pictures while you talk about Mr. Osteen from Jacksonville State. Or Jackson State.
So he's listed at 6'4", 290, and I think that's probably about right. He's a little bit light in the butt. not quite as big and physical as some of these other guys that they've brought in. Not as long arms either. I think he's a little on the stubby side for an offensive tackle. And you can see right there. I mean, you don't really see the go-go gadget arms that you do with somebody like Miles McVay when you flash up those pictures. But what you are getting is 2,700 career snaps at left tackle. And a guy that has graded out well in those 2,700 snaps at left tackle and has handled his business. So now most of that is at a lower level. I mean, he was at Jacksonville State when they moved up to the FBS level. So, I mean, he's had to make that jump himself, and he really hasn't played a bunch of top-level competition. But the tape to go look at, actually, is they played at Louisville last year, and Louisville had some pretty good edge players last year. I mean, Ashton Gelati especially was a guy that was a problem for virtually everybody that played Louisville last year, and Osteen handled his business against them. You know, he came out with actually a Pro Football Focus grade of 67.7 in that game. I went back through that game and paid, special attention to that one as I was looking at this, because that can kind of give you an indication of, okay, how's he going to work when the competition level steps up to the ACC? And there were some times where you could see the limitations physically in terms of the lack of power, the lack of length in general. He lost his balance at times, and I think that's more of a core strength and bend limitation. He's a little stiff through the hips. He's not one of those guys who's this is not a dancing bear. I mean, he's not really a bear, nor is he really a dancer in the flexibility aspect. But the foot quickness is excellent, and his ability to get out and deal with speed rushers and all of that is very good. His capacity to handle second moves and all those sorts of things, he handled those things very, very well. And I thought over the course of the game, you could see him getting a little bit more adjusted to the level of play against Louisville as well. Early in the game, he got popped a couple times. There's once where one of the things that actually stood out to me is he gets to the second level really well. He's a guy that, again, he moves almost like a tight end. There's certain ways in which he reminds me a little bit of Indiana's offensive tackles last year, who were very good and handled themselves very well, but also had some physical. They weren't quite as physical as some of the top level elite tackles in the country, but they were really good and really good in pass pro. But he got to the second level quickly, and there's one in particular where he got popped by the linebacker and went down. He lost that battle pretty badly, and it didn't happen again that I saw. Right? There were a couple other times where he lost his balance as a result of just essentially not having his feet under him and not having the strength when moving laterally to be able to hold up against some of the size that he was facing and the power that he was facing with those Louisville defensive linemen. But like I said, I thought over the course of that game, he got more adjusted to that. And by and large, handled his business well in that one, especially in pass protection. I thought by and large, he came out of that. He came out of that with more wins than losses, and didn't give up a sack. Didn't give up a bunch of pressure. He's quick enough to recover with just his feet if he's initially beaten by a speed rusher. That definitely showed up. Another weakness that showed up a little bit was that he does at times tend to duck his head and he wants to lunge, and against some of these guys at the ACC level, that's going to lead to some push-pull type stuff where they'll let you lunge at you, and then they'll pull on you and kind of get you off balance again. You saw that a little bit. But these are all things that they're going to be able to coach. I am curious to see if with a full summer, he's able to maybe add a little bit more strength in this level of a strength and conditioning program. I think this is probably your starting left tackle going into the season, to be honest. I think you're looking at somebody who, with 2,700 career snaps, with some reliability as a pass blocker, and he is scrappy. He's not going to go in. He's not the first guy you want off the bus. And there are times where, he kind of frustrated me because you'd like to see him be stickier as a blocker. He lost initial contact too often. And I think sometimes that was due to not having as long arms or maybe as strong hands. But he was so consistently in the right position. And at worst, you're looking at somebody who's kind of moving backwards slowly against some of these power rushers. He was not just ending up on his butt. He was not just ending up giving up a free lane to the outside. And even when he did give initial space to those rushers, he was able to recover with his quickness. I think he's going to be in the competition. He's a legit threat to win the left tackle job. Right now, based on what I saw, he's probably a favorite to take that job. I also think that given his quickness and all of that, he, in a pinch could probably move inside. The lack of power probably affects him there. I think you're really bringing him in to be that 1 year rental as a left tackle. And odds are he's going to be that guy. That's just my expectation based on what I've seen. There are some limitations. Some of the best, and especially the bigger defensive ends in the conference, are going to give him some trouble. You're going to get guys that are going to get him giving up ground in the backfield. I think in the run game, there are going to be times where he might need some help, especially if you're doing inside zone, some of that stuff. But again, he's scrappy. I think the positioning is there. The foot quickness is excellent as a positional blocker. He offers a lot, and I think that's something that they're looking for. And they want to be able to have somebody who's reliable on the outside. And if nothing else, I think he's above replacement level as a pass blocker at the left tackle position. And that's pretty valuable coming in.
Absolutely. That is Will Osteen from Jacksonville State, transfers in North Carolina, the third of the three offensive linemen we're going to talk about. Jason, to wrap this show in 2 minutes, has Carolina improved the offensive line a little bit, significantly, or not? Your take here.
That's a tough one.
And we do not talk questions before we do these shows, so they are gut reactions, I guess, if you.
What is our starting point? Is the real question.
That's valid.
Are we talking about from last year to this year, or are we talking about from spring to now? What is our starting point?
Given what we saw, let's do it this way. Given what we saw in spring and what we saw in the open practice, start there. Because I think last year is irrelevant.
Yeah,
honestly.
No, I think they've improved fairly significantly with these three. If nothing else, you're adding at least two guys, I think, that in 2025 are replacement level or better players at their respective spots, and one guy who can play 3 or 4 spots across your offensive line and be kind of a gap filler. And both guys with a ton of experience. And then you're adding a really high upside guy, a prospect for the future, really, that you have to think of almost as a high school recruit in some sense, in terms of him being on the more raw side. So, I look at what they were doing in the spring, and we talked about this in our post-spring video, that there was a real hole at the tackle position in particular, and the left tackle position specifically. I do not think Osteen is a, first team all ACC automatic type player that you're bringing in, but I do think he's a guy that at least is going to be, say, close to ACC average at the left tackle spot, if not maybe a touch better in the pass blocking side. Again, the best defensive lineman that you're going to face out there, he's going to have his hands full. But what we saw at tackle in the spring game, we had some questions. And I think you've at least got more potential answers there and significantly more depth. These are long seasons. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past is you've got to have, in my view, you've got to have a minimum of 8 guys you can trust going into a season. general rule is you want to have 3 tackles that you can trust, that you can use to kind of spell each other. Ideally, you want to swing. You want your starting left tackle, your starting right tackle, and then your swing tackle who can come in and take some reps here and there, especially as guys get tired or if a guy gets a little bit dinged, you've got that guy who can help steal some of those reps and keep you fresher. And then you've got to have 2 more guys for the interior. Ideally, you have a second center. That's the hardest thing to have, I think, oftentimes. But you want to have a second center that's reliable. And then you've got to have a guard who can also be that guy, that can be a sort of your third starter at the guard position and be able to rotate in at either guard, ideally. Ideally, you have, full 5. You got 10 that you trust. Almost nobody has that. Most teams are trying to identify who are our 8, who's our 5, and then who are the next 3 that can kind of come in and take those reps. I think with what they're looking at now, you've got Trevion Green, you've got Aiden Banfield, you've got Blasky, you've got Daniel King. Those are guys that I think you can trust coming out of the spring. That's 4. But we also know Trevion Green also has some limitations as well. We saw some of those last year, so aware of those. Chris O'Kelly worked into the rotation some in the spring. I'm still a little more skeptical on certain things there, but they seem to think that he might be a 5th guy that they can trust. Where's your other guys? I think they added 2 more. So that gets you to maybe 6 or 7. And then it's just a matter of developing the rest of those guys internally to make sure that you're getting to the 8 number by the regular season. But I think you've added 2 more guys you can trust, and that's a big deal, especially since one of them can serve as a swing guard or a swing tackle. So I think you've gotten better. Is this, Nick Saban level, peak Nick Saban Alabama offensive line? It is not. But I think they've at least gotten to where you feel like you've got enough bodies up front where you're not going to get run over, that you're not fielding a bunch of turnstiles or, the 2024 Florida State offensive line or anything like that.
And you don't have to be Nick Saban level offensive line in this conference. And North Carolina obviously misses some of the bigger names in the conference, but on to TCU, and it's not that far away. It's like 120 days or less. It's ridiculous how fast this is coming upon us. That is Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley. Been talking UNC Portal Scout, the offensive line, recent additions, Hall, Moore, and Osteen. If you missed anything, rewind it and listen to it again. Check it out on Inside Carolina. Check out all the discussion on the Tar Pit Premium message boards, and check out Johnny T-shirt. Jason, it's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. It's great to be fully involved in these sorts of things.
Fully engaged. You're either in or you're out. And if you're doing this kind of stuff, you got to be all in.
I demand to be fully involved.
You're in.